It is Friday, baby, and
Finally.
that means tier list Fridays,
Oh, yes.
TLF. And yeah, we know we have ignored the healers in the raid for too long of a time. It's finally time to
criminally
check it out.
underrated. Yes.
Yes.
Healing also, by the way, healers are probably one of the hardest to actually
Oh man,
rank.
that's complicated as fuck, man. Why don't we just do DPS and that's it?
Thank God we only have 7 specs, man. Jesus.
Yeah. No, it is complicated to like rank these because the data is so convoluted in terms of like HPS and DPS and how the cooldowns are being used and what comps teams are looking for when progressing. You can talk about, specific healers killing Sarkaret on Mythic. Some of them are like a majority in the other fights. It's a mess, man.
Yeah, people swap healers a lot. I mean, we know this from our progression since I was also a healer last year. You want certain healers for some bosses, certain healers for other bosses, so it's probably one of the most interchangeable parts of your team composition. So it's always difficult, but we did a bunch of research and I think we have our finger on the topic. I don't know if that's a thing, but it's a thing now.
Well, it's good that the finger isn't in the topic, and let's start it off with Restoration Shaman. All right, Restoration Shaman, who on Sarkaret, right from the get-go, it is the second best DPS healer on the last boss of the raid. But I think it's like more prominent in a lot of comps because it has like really strong cooldowns.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to like some other healers on Rachel, have Spirit Link, like the Ancestral Protection Totem.
We need some of that, man, to res us in our mid-fight, man.
Well,
Jesus.
we have some restoration.
The reincarnates. We have some shamans that reincarnate without any indication. But yeah, Resto Shaman is it's actually good. Like, if you look at the top guilds that are actually clearing Sarkaret, top 100, top 200, it is second in like kind of like half the kills, which obviously indicates that it has a lot of utility, but in terms of numbers, it doesn't really surpass any other healer. However, overall, I think it's a pretty good spec. It's in a good situation. It's not neurotically bad in all of this.
I think we can say that it's probably the worst HPS out of all of the healers, but once again, its cooldowns really compensate for that, and specifically talking about the last boss, it's very important there as well. So we're gonna place it into A tier. I think
for sure.
I can see, I can foresee a very juicy A tier for the future. All right, Discipline Priest. Now, Discipline Priest, you can bet your sweet tooth it will do good HPS and amazing DPS.
One of the only healers that can actually consistently do both. Though.
Yeah, and not sacrifice too much because this is how the spec works. Sadly, in terms of like Sarkaret kills, I think we saw 3 or 4 logs.
By this point, it's like 4 logs. This is probably because we're getting to Holy as well, but likely since Priest is a competitive class when it comes to its healing specs. And Discipline is, I mean, overall it's performing really well. Obviously, it has some of the strongest defensives in the game and a really nice playstyle where you have a lot of short cooldowns like Rapture and Evangelism. You can cast them along the fight a lot of times.
This is the thing, right? Because you look at like the DPS. Obviously, this is a very hot topic, but in terms of like the DPS, it is like the second best all around, like throughout the raid, right?
Finally, they needed years to get this back.
It's there, right? Because that's like the bread and butter of the spec, as opposed to like Resto Shaman earlier, where you would see it being the second DPS, but only on Sarkaret. On other fights, it's just like meh.
So too few parses on Sarkaret to kind of figure out where Discipline is.
Yeah. It's like I feel like we have to rank Discipline lower this time around, just because of the poor representation overall. I think people are either scared or it's just, as you said, the competition with Holy Priest, which would get you shortly.
It might not have as much flexibility as other healers, where you kind of have to always deal damage and kind of have to constantly keep atonements up, where other healers can like swap between doing massive heals and massive damage.
And also HPS isn't the greatest either. Let's just be.
It's still good though.
It's still good. We're gonna put it into B tier, not C or D. We'll get to like the end of it and talk about the research. Okay, sure. Holy Paladin. Now this is obviously a different story where you definitely see. I think it's like the biggest DPS healer.
Oh man, like they've exploded in this tier, man. Last year they were a little bit meh. Yeah, in the raid. It's doing really well though, and obviously you're kind of always needing to deal some sort of DPS rotation to be able to heal with Holy Paladin, because that's the most efficient way to build Holy Power. And up until the rework, we'll see after it's in 1.5.
The rework will definitely provide some versatility, but again, similar to Resto Shaman, I feel like Holy Paladins have like an amazing kit overall with strong cooldowns. This is why they're much more present. You see a lot more parses in the mythic progression. It's just, the Avenging Crusader and Beacon are like super efficient on healing everybody, and it's like, you know, one of the biggest HPS sources on in its profile.
I mean, it's kind of like the Rising Mist, the Mistweaver feeling, where the biggest, you know, efficient source of that healing is just doing
Not
damage.
Everybody enjoys that, let's be fair, but we are talking about here the highest end of players and guilds and stuff. If you're playing heroic or if you're progressing, you know, in your own time on your guild or whatever, it's fine. You can play whatever healer. But for this ranking,
it's good. It has good reputation on Sarkareth kills as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it into A tier. I think it's fair, right?
Yeah,
I think better than Resto Shaman.
A little bit better, yes, for sure. You see more Holy Paladins than Resto Shamans anyway.
All right. Holy Priest.
Holy All right, listen.
How about them apples?
This is a very interesting, because if you look on we're gonna have this at the end. If you look on multiple websites, this is a very juggled around spec all around. But obviously we know from the race world first, which we're not using to rank healers because that's a little bit weird. It's just like it's a world of its own.
Though. Yeah.
But still in the top 100 and 200, I think is the most used healer, period. Most guilds even have 2 of them, and you don't really see any other healer being taken twice.
Yeah, that's true. Also, it is like the top tier HPS performer.
It's really good, yeah.
There's really no competition when it comes to like HPS. We can talk about like some of the worst performers on DPS on Sarkareth, for example. Yeah. But yeah, it's like this spec is being picked up on all sorts of comps in all sorts of guilds. It is the most present. I think it has the most parses out of all of them. And
this good reliable healing through power, prayer of mending, and what was it? It's Mastery Echo of Light. I think I haven't played Holy Priest in a long time.
Well, that being said, let's just
it's Giga. It is the
S tier. Yeah, it is the S tier healer for this mythic raid season. That's just the facts. We're not taking any bias here, because if we would, you would have seen Discipline in S tier all the time.
Yeah, it's understandable.
And Mistweaver too. Now Mistweaver, like
this has been one of the most fun and surprising
good surprises
stories
for the mythic progression, actually, because I think there's one log that's like the highest parse log with the
HPS, like in terms of raw. I mean, we all obviously have limited logs on mythic Sarkareth. We're talking about Sarkareth kills, but we mean mythic.
Yeah, it's mythic. It's mythic, like highest of the highest, end of the end.
What's cool is that it went from probably universally being considered the worst healer spec for years to actually doing surprisingly well, and I think it's still unpopular though. I don't know why it's unpopular.
It is because it's a very similar story to like when we talked about the why should you play the most fun healer or whatever.
Yeah.
I just feel people are more inclined with Mistweavers to just try out the different healing strategies and play styles. Not everybody enjoys that fisting all around. I don't know why. Because it's fun as hell, but
it is fun.
Maybe that's why, like, the most efficient being the fist weaving, people are just not as interested. And to be fair, we do know that this is like one of the most efficient healing, like, you know, to the Rising Mist.
They're keeping up renewing mist on everybody, and those Vivify cleaves, man. Yeah. It's satisfying, but I guess that's probably causing some skill issues, not necessarily skill issues, but it does seem to have overall like the biggest range of performance from like the worst to the best players out of all of the healers. So
and it's still unpopular.
It's either very difficult to play on Sarkareth fights overall, or maybe just difficult to play in the raid. Maybe the raid mechanics are just not helping it a lot, but still it's performing really great in the right hands.
Yeah, we have to put it into A tier because it's quite represented regardless. Preservation Evoker. What a story, man. What a story.
Well, I mean, Preservation Evoker, ever since it was added to the expansion, has been pretty good all around. It went through a bunch of changes, nerfs, and, kind of shift in the way that it's doing. Healing, obviously, with the tier set right now, there's a lot of focus on Spirit Bloom, which is a big source of its HPS performance. It is overall, I think, like the best in terms of HPS on in the raid end.
Throughout the raid,
yeah, for sure.
And on Sarkareth, I believe, as well, right? So this is like an all-rounder, like best. In some, you see it in some comps. You see it like even with the comps with Holy Priest. Sometimes you look at the logs and the teams. Sometimes you get a Preservation Evoker in there. But I guess you can talk about being like the worst DPS. So it is the best HPS.
The thing is, because we mentioned DPS, but you have to understand that in progression rating, nailing that if you wipe at 0.1%, you wiped at 0.1%. Every little bit counts, and I think this is probably Preservation's biggest weaknesses. No matter what it does, it just doesn't get the numbers out. I think the nerf and the loss of the tier set from Vault really tanked its DPS a lot, way more than any other healer on the tier list. which is probably what's keeping it from being, you know, let's say holy priest levels.
Yeah, but listen, we do not condone the obligation to do DPS as healers. So because it is very powerful with the healing numbers, we're gonna place it like in front of the A tier. Yeah, this is 100% it. Last on the list, Restoration Druid.
Resto Druid.
Yeah, this is like the second best HPS performance in the raid. So like really like very close with preservation in some capacity, but it falls down in a couple of fights. It's all fine. It has like decent HPS on Sarkareth, I believe. Like, you know, the burst HPS.
I think
is
it's
really
probably
good
one of
with
the most flexible healers in the raid right now. Overall, it doesn't, you know, top any amazing HPS charts or any amazing DPS charts, but it seems to keep a consistency that no other healer seems to have. And we'll see how it's ranked, but I think it's maybe one of the better healers to have, more the reliable, let's say.
Yeah, in Mythic progression for sure. This is one of the healers that also like tends to sacrifice some HPS for DPS if it comes to that, but nothing too dramatic. So you definitely see a lot more parses with Resto Druid. You definitely see him in multiple comps, and I think again, all of these specs have been I've cleared Sarkareth on Mythic. For sure. But yeah, we see a lot more numbers with Restoration Druid. I think it's fair to put this into an A tier as well.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a very balanced. I mean, if you look at sideways, it looks like something else. But that's not the point.
Don't look. Don't look.
Never mind.
Don't look.
The healer meta seems to be relatively balanced in terms of overall Mythic progression. Obviously, it's very hard to judge how healers do perform in a progression setting because, you know, you can have healers just assigned for like 1 or 2 very important cooldowns, and then they just don't really do that much for the rest of the fight. So that kind of skews overall performance when you look at, you know, rankings and data and all of that. Yeah. But I feel like since all of the healers are definitely taken into the top 200, we barely have 200 Sarkareth kills, at least recorded anyway. Yeah, and we still have all the representation there. So I think it's a pretty good point to make that, you know, they're good. All of them are good.
Representation. Right, looking at the Warcraft logs, you can see here, like this is based on the HPS numbers, like overall. They're quite close to each other. Obviously, you can see some differences there, but not that huge. But then if you then switch it from Warcraft logs to like sub creation, then you don't understand anything. You look
Discipline F tier, like
this is no way, man. If you look at like guilds playing with Discipline, sure, it's not as popular. You don't see as many logs, and maybe this is why it's being thrown into the F tier and sub creation, because there's not many numbers to look at. But the numbers that are there are like revealing a very potent and very capable spec on progressing through the Mythic raid. Same story with Mistweaver. And there's also like, what was it? U.GG. U.GG, like again, a similar story. Like, okay, they don't have a D and F tier or whatever, but you do see Discipline.
Resto Druid put like in B tier, well, at least like behind the... So there's obviously a small difference between each spec's performance, right? We've tried to, you know, represent them in tier lists like that before. We had like sub-creation style tier lists, but obviously wouldn't do it justice to put specs into like C and D tier, considering that they're actually doing really well. So I think this is maybe one of... We keep saying this about a lot of specs in a lot of our tier lists, but it is, strangely enough, a pretty balanced meta in terms of across the board, but now for healers as well. So I think it's a good time to just play what you want.
Yeah, if you want to play any of these healers, just, you know, have fun, and you'll do fine, in regardless of the capacity of content you're planning out to do. Like if it's Mythic rating or Heroic. On Heroic, you can't, there's not even a discussion, okay? Hey, but this is the final list. Thank you, patrons, for supporting content. As always, check the link in the description for more details. Flame, carry on.
Well, thank you for watching the video as well, and we will see you with more tier lists in the future and other videos. We do some other videos too.
All right, bye. Have a great weekend, y'all.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.